Hello, Lindsay. How are you?
Hey, Aubrey, I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here today.
Me too. I have an interesting question for you. We've never talked about this, at least you and I.
Yes.
Do you ever pick up litter that you see on the street? Like someone else has thrown trash on the ground. Would you pick it up and
hmm
throw it away or do you just leave it?
Yeah, I mean, I try to sometimes, but not always. I have a clear memory of when I was a kid. This is probably not the best thing, but in front of my dad's office, it was like the 90s. There were lots of cigarettes in front of his
Mm.
business, and I remember going and helping him pick those up as a kid to clean up the space around to make it more
Oh,
more beautiful, more
yes.
professional looking.
Did you wear
Um
gloves? I hope.
Yeah, yeah, wear
Okay,
gloves, and
good.
also just, like, not, like, picking it up with your hands, just, like, going in and, like, grabbing it with something, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
I'm the same. Like whenever I see it, I want to clean it up. If I don't have gloves, especially in a post-COVID world, I
yeah,
don't feel comfortable just touching anything that someone else has left unless I have gloves and I'm intentionally on like a neighborhood cleanup
yeah.
activity, right? If it's which I feel sort of terrible about. I used to. I used to just like pick up and throw away anything, but
You
with
used
COVID
to,
now I'm nervous.
post-COVID. Oh,
Yeah.
interesting, okay,
Mm.
Yeah, I guess, there's a big difference between being in a community cleanup effort versus just individually on your own, but I do see a lot of environmentalists doing that on their own, just sort of
Yes. I have
picking
a
stuff
lot of
up, just
respect for that.
Yeah, I do too, I do
Absolutely.
too. Yeah,
First,
what are
I
we
want to
talking
quickly
about
define
today?
this word litter that we use. This might be unfamiliar to listeners. It means like trash thrown on the ground, right? So if you
Mhm.
see any garbage on the ground, we would call that litter, which is
Yep.
interesting. And I do think it's one thing to not litter. We all know we shouldn't litter. Don't throw trash on the ground. Don't throw trash out the window. But
Of
to pick
course.
up someone else's trash, that's next level, I feel like.
It's next level, right? It's requires really wanting to do it, for sure, for
Yes,
sure.
which
Yeah.
I was really motivated and inspired when I saw this article about Japanese fans after the World Cup, the game that was Japan versus Costa Rica. And this is very interesting. We're going to talk about this today and talk about what we can learn from Japan's amazing example. And then we also
Yes.
want to share phrases for starting a conversation about keeping public spaces clean. This is such an interesting thing to talk about. We want you guys to have the vocabulary to do it.
I love that idea. I love it. This is a topic, just like the pandemic, it's a topic that affects every single one of us. We all have a
Yes.
perspective towards this. We have different perspectives on the environment, of course. And we also want to make sure you guys know we know that cultures are different. Attitudes towards littering, towards trash, towards the environment are completely different. We have different circumstances around the world. So this
Yes.
episode is not about judgment and saying what should be done and that kind of thing. Is just observing and opening a conversation, giving you guys the tools to actually talk about this in English with native speakers.
Exactly. And we would love to hear from you. Come to our YouTube channel, comment on this episode. What is this like in your culture? After you hear sort of all these details about Japan and our culture, we would love to hear what is this like around the world and what conversations can you have about it?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So where are we going to start today, Aubrey?
Yeah, so there's a viral video out there you guys can see of Japanese fans cleaning up the World Cup stadium. And it's actually not the first time. This happened in 2018 after the World Cup game Japan versus Colombia, where fans
Mhm.
brought bags with them and were cleaning up not only their litter, their trash, but
Yep.
also the stands around them, right?
Yeah.
And so, reading this article, it definitely is clear that it's showing a sign of respect for the place, and that in Japan, people are taught at a young age. It's a very important part of culture to keep public spaces clean, right? To when you leave a place, leave it cleaner than it was before. And I
Mhm.
really did start thinking, what's that like in my culture? I think it could be better for sure. And it's a very individual basis too, because this article made it clear that it wasn't everyone. It was like a group of fans that did this. So we certainly can't say every person in Japan does this,
Right.
right?
Right, right,
But
right.
it was interesting. I feel like the average United States fan would not clean up anyone else's trash. And maybe
Right.
they should, maybe it wouldn't hurt to do that. So it is an interesting topic. It's an interesting debate.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, I can say when I lived in Japan, I was really struck by how clean the subways
Mm.
were. Just incredible coming from New York. And now I think New York subways have gotten even worse, sadly, of the
Oh,
things that I've
no.
heard about that New York has gone a little bit downhill in terms of cleanliness post-pandemic. But even in 2006, I mean, in Tokyo, it was just incredible how spotless the public spaces were, the subway stations, the train lines, just the streets.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
It's
Yeah.
so it's so nice to visit a place and see that and feel that like, "Oh, this feels clean. It feels like people take care of this place." It really
Mhm.
makes tourists want to go there, right? Just having you say
Yes.
that makes me kind of not wanna visit New York. I feel like it was pretty clean in 2008 when I was there, but
Yeah.
that's really unfortunate that it's gotten worse. I hope they'll have, like, a big push for
The
cleanup because I wanna go
Yeah.
places that are clean, where people care about this and take care of public spaces.
Well, I think they will. I think they're gonna have a comeback. I mean, people
Fingers
are starting
crossed.
to go back to the office in New York, and
Mm,
they need people back in the office, at least in Midtown, so that all those businesses can come back. The businesses that served commuters are suffering, and they need to come back. So as office workers come back, it has to get cleaned up. You know what I mean? It's kinda like all these things have to happen.
yes, absolutely. I wanted to
Yeah.
point out when I read this New York Times article, there was a really interesting vocabulary word. They were talking about how fans were cleaning up, bottles, ticket stubs, garbage, and that said, and other stadium detritus, which is such a high
Ooh, good
level word. You
word.
will see this in the news. You'll hear natives use it. What does that mean, Lindsay? Detritus.
Oh, this is a brand new word for me, Aubrey, to be honest. It feels like an SAT word.
Yes, for sure.
This word means waste or trash or debris of any kind.
Yes,
So,
it's one of those words, right, that you see it in the news and you might have to even native speakers might have to Google it because we don't use it that often. It is an interesting word, though.
yeah, I love it. And I just want to make sure our listeners know that you are over on IELTS Energy twice a week with Jessica, and you guys talk about some amazing high level IELTS words,
Yes,
right?
right.
To
Anyone
score
preparing for
high.
IELTS has to use band 9 vocabulary, which means
Yeah.
less common words. Detritus, that's a band 9 word. If you can use
Oh,
that
yeah.
on your IELTS speaking exam, that's boosting your vocabulary score. So you're right. Follow IELTS Energy podcast. If you're not, guys, we are teaching lots of high level vocab there so that you can get the score you need on the IELTS exam.
Yeah, good stuff. Just type in the search bar IELTS Energy, and again, you will see the yellow. Uh, Go ahead and hit follow on that show. Okay, Aubrey, what's next?
So what's interesting is that some other World Cup fans started following suit, which this is an interesting idiom that means following the example, right?
Mhm.
So after the Japan win over Germany, fans from Morocco and Saudi Arabia were following that example and cleaning up after games. But it did
Love
create an
that.
interesting discussion and interesting conversation because there are certainly those out there who believe that there is staff that's hired for this and they're making a living doing this job. So potentially there's the other side of the argument that we should leave that for those who are hired to do it. This is interesting. I kind of almost don't know where I fall on this argument.
Yeah, that's a good point, Aubrey. I mean, for example, being at a restaurant, what do? When you leave the table, do you stack the dishes? Do you kind of like take your napkin and sort of like, if there's any water spilled or something, put it like consolidate things?
Right.
Or
That's a
do you
really good
say,
question.
right, right. Or do you say, oh, well, there's a waitress coming. I'm going to be tipping this waitress. Like that's their job, right? So where do you come down?
Yeah, for me, this is interesting. I usually do like I'll kind of try to clean up the table and stack the dishes and try to make it easier for the busser, who usually
Right.
is the person clearing, or the waitress, the
Right.
server, because sometimes
Yes.
there's not a busser, right? Even though
Right.
I'm tipping, if I'm sitting there chatting with friends, I have
Hmm.
time. I'm kind of a person that keeps myself busy, so I'm sort of doing it because why not? I'm available. I'm not
Yeah.
busy, right?
Why not?
But I know
Yeah.
most people don't and
Okay.
feel that, like you said, we're tipping for this service, so we don't need to clean up. And neither is wrong, really. That's kind of interesting about this type of thing
Yeah.
is there really is no right or wrong.
Yeah, it just depends on how you look at it. I'm kind of on your side. I will consolidate as much as I can to kind of hand things to the waiter, but sometimes I think, "Oh my gosh, is this not the way they want these plates stacked? Maybe I'm making it harder for them because I stacked that plate that way." But yeah, I think it's good to try a little bit, but you're right, there's no right or wrong. It's very cultural, right? We have a
Right.
lot of I bet our listeners are gonna have some very visceral reactions to this episode.
Yes, come
I have
back
a
and comment.
feeling.
I want to
Yeah.
hear those reactions, right? I want to see your comments. So, we're now
Yeah.
going to share some phrases for starting a conversation about keeping public spaces clean. This is such an interesting thing to discuss.
Okay, Aubrey, let's get into it. So, what is that first phrase that we could use if we want to start a conversation about this?
Yeah. So when you read something interesting like this in the news, you want to be able to ask people about it. So here's a great phrase. You could say, "Did you hear about Japanese fans cleaning up after that World Cup game?" And it's just the "did you hear?" and then fill in with anything you've read in the news, something really interesting. And then depending on their answer, they might say, "Yes, I heard about that. What did you think?" And the conversation after that will be really interesting. Or they might say, "No, what are you talking about? Tell me about it."
Right, exactly. And then if we want to extend out to any other topic, right? Any other environmental
Oh, yeah.
topic or really anything, did you hear about blank, right? Did you hear about this? This is why I think it's so key, not just for the IELTS exam, right, which comes to mind first, but for just life and conversation to always be reading, right?
Yes.
ABR, always be reading.
Absolutely. And
um
I love when a friend will ask me this because even if I am always reading, there's so much happening in the world. There's no way I'm going to see every news article, right? I
right.
didn't actually see this one until Jessica shared it with me, one of our team members here. And I was
Yep.
really glad she did because I want to know these things. So I want to have
Oh
that
yeah.
conversation where someone says, "Did you hear about this?" And then they
Right.
inform me about something I didn't know about.
Oh, it's so much more interesting than talking about the weather.
Oh, absolutely.
All right. What would be our second phrase, Aubrey?
Yes. So, our second is to, instead of asking them if they've read it or heard about it, just start the conversation with something like, I heard in Japan they do an amazing job keeping public spaces clean. Do you think we do that well? Were you taught as a kid to?" And then fill that in with "not litter, keep public areas clean," right? So just like you said, we can fill this in with anything. We say, "I
Mhm.
heard," and share something that you respect and admire about another culture, another country. And then
Right.
we start the conversation by saying, like, "How do you feel like we do that in this country?" Right? Do you think we do a good job at that?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that this, if we want to make this really interesting, this gets into a deeper conversation about uh place within society and so
Mm,
socioeconomic, right? Because I think in a lot of cultures, the idea of picking up someone's trash, people might judge that as, oh, you must be like lower in society or something like that. Whereas here, if you're organizing kind of a cleanup day, it's not that way. That's not the judgment, right? That's not the position. If you have the time to organize that day, that means you're doing well, right?
yeah,
So that's why I think this topic is so interesting. Just a
that's a
side
good
point. We
point.
can we can keep going, but that's what I'm seeing as the big point here, right,
Oh, I
Aubrey?
mean, I feel like this could be a really interesting other episode because if I imagine like celebrities and famous
Yeah.
personalities, would they be
Right.
willing
Oh,
to be
but
part of
if
a
you're
neighborhood cleanup? I'd like
if
to
you're
hope
doing
they would, but I
if
don't
you're
know.
doing that well, right, good question. So, yeah. Oh, there's so much here, guys. So we're giving you
Totally.
the tools. Think of this episode as a conversation opener, but
Yes,
go deeper, right? Like don't just go to what the article is about. Go deeper into what did your culture teach you about what it means when someone picks up trash, right? What does that mean about that person, their place in society, how much money they make? This is good stuff. This is what builds human connection. As long as we're not putting judgment on it and we know that it's different for different cultures, that can be
absolutely.
such a rich connection, right?
Yes. And then our last phrase here is to help us be part of the solution, right?
Yes.
So you can organize that like neighborhood cleanup that we don't have to go through an official charity. I did this not long ago on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We're like, let's do a neighborhood cleanup. And we organized it. So here's a phrase you could use: "I'm organizing an activity to pick up litter in the park next Saturday. Want to come?" And it's super
Yeah.
stress free. You could say this to a coworker, a neighbor, a family member. We ended up getting a lot of people and their kids, and it felt so good
Awesome.
to be part of the solution and also setting an example for the younger generation.
I love that. I love that. And this kind of thing is common in our country, right?
Hmm.
Organizing events like that. You're a real community organizer, Aubrey. I think you're
I am
active
a
in the
little bit.
community. You're always out there making a difference, doing good things. I love that.
I try to, and this really felt like a very important one. I need to do it at
Yeah.
least annually, more if I can. And I definitely recommend everyone out there to do that. And like you said, Lindsay, to have the conversation and think about if you're not willing to do it, why is that? Right? No
Yes.
judgment, but I think it's interesting. It's very cultural, it's very individual based, and it's interesting because I do think there's value in taking care of and keeping public spaces clean.
Absolutely. And so I'm thinking for our listeners as a takeaway, Aubrey, I mean, if you guys are looking to move to a new country, let's say you're moving to Canada, moving to the US, and if you come from a place where it would be unheard of at your kind of level in life to pick up trash, and then you're invited to a community day through your company. Sometimes corporations will
Yes.
actually organize Fortune 500 companies,
Oh, yeah.
probably organize trash cleanup events or environmental days. You may be invited to one of these and think about how you might respond, right? It's,
Yes.
culture is so fundamental to what we assume. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, especially where you could really build connections and build your network. I can imagine, like, serving like that and helping would be the best place to be, like, walking
Yeah.
and chatting with someone else and getting to know
Exactly.
someone you work with.
Exactly.
It could be
Exactly.
a great opportunity for connection.
Exactly. That's where the connection is gonna come. So if you do get
Yes,
that invite, we absolutely invite you, even though it might feel weird from where you come from, we invite you to join because that's where those connections are gonna be built, not by declining and staying home when all of your coworkers are there building the relationship on that Saturday afternoon, right? So very
absolutely.
interesting.
I think
Very
this is a great
interesting.
takeaway just to A, be open to helping keep public spaces clean, right? Follow Japan's
Yep.
example. I love that a lot of their fans cleaned up after the World Cup. I think it's so awesome. And, yeah, I think we should teach children and ourselves set an example to keep public spaces clean. But also, like you said, Lindsay, go deeper. Don't be
Go
afraid
deeper.
of the conversation, the cultural aspects. It's so interesting to talk about.
Super interesting. Really good stuff. Guys, if you like thought provoking episodes like this one, go ahead and hit follow on All Ears English. Don't miss a single episode. We publish 4 days a week here on this show. We've got lots of great content to help you find that moment of connection with English, okay? With another human being using English, rather. Good stuff, Aubrey.
Awesome. So good,
All
Lindsay.
right.
This was really fun and interesting. I will see you next time.
Yes, it was. All right. I'll talk to you soon, Aubrey. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.